Have you guys always been like in here in the campus, or did NASA open this recently? Or
So this was formerly Navy Air Base. So during the Cold War, particularly, they flew the P-3 to hunt for submarines. 50,000 people at one point, and then after the Cold War, NASA basically took this over and then turned this into NASA Research Park.
Right.
So all the infrastructure is old NASA infrastructure. It's like really shitty infrastructure, as you can see. It's super fun to be here, but infrastructure is shit. You've got about 70 startups here. They're all in the space industry. So anything from like nanosats, CubeSats, Lunar Express, the guys who want to go back to the moon are here. And then lastly, you've got two universities, us and Carnegie Mellon. And we've been here basically since we are around, since 2008.
Yeah, and it's been pretty nice. And NASA still has, like, I think some operations somewhere around the base, right? Not completely shut down.
Well, NASA is, so the Navy is out here, but like NASA Ames over there is still like 3,000 people or so, and it's one of the main research sites for them.
It's always like a big site, you know, whenever, like the first time I think I was on the 101, and whenever I bring people over, it's like, what is this thing? You know, like I didn't realize there was like actual hardware stuff, you know, that used to happen in Silicon Valley and rockets.
The best thing is the building you see over there with the blue like structure. That building is the largest wind tunnel in the world. So now you've got like a data point you can give people, which is hilarious. So apparently like they don't use this like 30 years like due to like you use computers today, right?
Right, you have to do all the modeling.
Right, exactly. But apparently when they switched this on, you know, back in the day, you had brownouts in Mountain View because it takes up so much energy. It's like sucks every bit of energy like out of Mountain View, basically.
It's very funny to think about like, when doing high tech and doing, you know, startups was kind of like a risk for your life, maybe, or a risk for like your livelihood or the people around you. So now it kind of feels very like you're behind a computer, you're typing on the keyboard, you know, you're shaking hands on Central Road. It seemed like it's changed quite a bit, right? It's not as adventurous as it used to be.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, we're not like.
Disagree. I mean, do you feel like it's still like the same spirit as it was, you know, back then?
Well, I wasn't around back then, but so I don't know. I don't know, like, I think one thing which you can probably bemoan a little bit is like we're definitely more removed from like the actual outcome of our works, right? Like back in the day, I mean, even when I had the great pleasure of going to Park and SRI and so on and seeing like the old stuff, and like back in the day, we were like really involved. Like you build a computer, like it was this big thing, right? Now, like my server infrastructure is on frickin' Amazon cloud. I don't even know how the server looks like, right? Like even 10, 15 years ago when I built my companies, we bought servers. Right, I still at least knew what the box looks like.
Now you don't even know necessarily like what your customers look like or who they are. I mean, you should, but you know, you don't necessarily meet all
numbers,
of them.
Right? Now they're like numbers in your Google Analytics, right? They're not actual people anymore. So,
but I think it works the other way too. It's like, you know, you publish this really great blog and now a book too, like the Heretic, right? About like founders and I think you call it like daily therapeutics for founders. And I think it works the same way too, the same way that like, you know, when you're building a startup, you don't necessarily see your customers or see your partners or see kind of what that's like. I feel like people have this perception of founders, you know, from magazine and from TechCrunch of like, you know, living the life and like posting party stories on Instagram and stuff like that. But it's not necessarily all that on the inside, especially for people that are not yet successful or maybe will never be successful. And so, you know, on one hand, you have this kind of public image of famous, successful founders, you know, the Zuckerbergs and one of this world, and they're doing great. I don't think they need, you know, much help at this point. And at the other end, I think that this really dark, sometimes kind of complicated reality of being a founder and failing. And so how do you reconcile that? You know, why do you think there's this need for, you know, daily therapeutics for founders? You know, why do you think it's hard to be a founder in some ways?
Well, I think there's a bunch of things, right? The first of all is I think it's super lonely to be a founder. Mostly because like we live in a culture which makes us say everything is awesome. Right? I recently met a friend of mine who literally couldn't make payroll. Like I knew that he couldn't make payroll, right? And he was at a party. And I'm like, see him interact at the party, and like people ask him, how's your business going? He's like, it's awesome, it's super cool, right? And you're like, I know that you're crying yourself into sleep because you can't make payroll, right? And granted, like this is what is expected of you as a founder. Like you can't go out and say like everything is shit because then like nobody invests in you, you don't get partners, etc. So I think it's paramount. Actually, as a founder, it's really paramount to surround yourself with people with whom you can be real. So I encourage founders to find other founders who are going through the same shit, non-competing, right? So you can be totally honest, safe space, and really be real. And it's a little bit like anonymous alcoholics, right? Like you need to have this space where you can be okay with this. And then also like do self-care, right? Like really figure out like what do you as a person need to like make that good.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's really freaking hard. And at the same time, it's the best thing you can do, right? It's like,
yeah, founder burnout, I think, is something that's kind of, a very real thing. You always hear about employee burnout or all that. But I think founder burnout is interesting because you don't necessarily like quit because you can't really quit as a founder. But your stress and your kind of fatigue shows up in other ways in kind of your work and your company direction. And I think those flameouts are kind of really harder, right, to kind of maybe talk about openly because you can't turn to investors, you can't turn to employees, you can't maybe even turn to your co-founder about this, and you really kind of have a different support network. So it can be hard. So what are some of the things that you've seen that kind of comes up pretty often that people kind of really related to on your blog or talk to you about in terms of what are the biggest kind of psychological thing that you face as a founder?
Right. So I think most important and most interesting to me is talking about like the negative sides and how you deal with that, right? So anything from like I needed to fire like this person, my co-founder relationship like is deteriorating, I can't raise money, right? I don't need to write yet another blog on like how do you pitch a VC, or how do you write a business plan or whatever. Like they exist, they're great, they don't need me. I think what is missing somewhat, apparently, like because I found a really interesting audience there, and people really connect with that, is the questions of like, how do you deal with the hard things, right? Like, as I mentioned, like I need to fire someone. That's probably the hardest thing you can do because that person came to you because you sold them a vision and suddenly that doesn't work anymore, right? So I think it's really about like figuring out like how do you find answers to the negatives you experience as an entrepreneur. And at the same time, keeping up the spirit and like being like super anchored in like what you're doing is important and it's awesome. And it's like, there's so much beautiful things about being a founder, right? Dave Pink, who wrote Drive, right? He says like, happiness is when you have autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? Like as a founder, assuming you're doing something you actually really believe in, and granted some founders don't, and that's a real problem. So you have purpose, you've got autonomy, the ultimate autonomy, right? And hopefully you know the shit you're doing, so it's mastery, right? So you actually have everything which you need to like be highly motivated.
Right, it should be, right? But I find that some people like, don't actually want that autonomy, for example, or realize they don't really have the mastery. And you have those weird things, from imposter syndrome, I guess, to just people kind of feeling like, they need to hire somebody else to kind of run the company that they created because they don't want to be doing that. They just don't want the responsibility. They might even be good at it. They just kind of don't want that pressure. And that's very funny how you kind of see a lot of people that kind of discover themselves. And I used to think it was like, oh, it's just, it's all those YC founders. They're like 15, like what do they know about themselves? But, you see that even with people who are founding companies at like 35, 40, and they're like, oh, wow, like I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that about this. And a startup does push you into at least that confine of like, how much do you believe in yourself, right? It's kind of a bit of a, almost kind of a religious moment, right? It's like that faith in yourself that you have to question maybe at some point, but also kind of keep strong to keep going. So, what are some of the things that you've seen kind of helps? We mentioned, having a network, right? Having people you can rely to, kind of identifying those three things and kind of really stay in touch with them. But what else do you think helps kind of founders navigate what is almost certain, right, for anybody starting a company today, going to be like a very, a road that has its complex moments?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is that you need to do something which is aligned with your purpose. Like, you need to figure out, like, the company you started, the business you're running, it needs to be aligned with what you want to do, right? Because take me, like I founded my first company out of college and like, granted, I wanted to make, the quick million. Like I was like, intoxicated during the first .com boom. I was intoxicated by the successes I've seen around me and media portrayed them, right? And I built a business which I actually didn't care all that much about. Like I cared about building the business, but the core of the business, I was like, I don't care, right? It's a media thing, it's like, whatever. And when the going got tough, and I can pretty much guarantee you it will get tough, right? Because every startup goes through these like hard pieces. I just quit. I couldn't do it. Like it was like, I got depressed and I was like, I could not do this company, and then basically company sunk. I think if you have conviction about the thing you're doing if you're solving a problem you're really deeply passionate about, or you're so deeply passionate about building the company for a reason, like if there's purpose, you're actually good and you can actually work through all these, like the hardship.
And I see a lot of kind of founders kind of do that, where, you know, it's not necessarily kind of the core thing about the company that they really, really believe in, but for example, they really believe in, you know, having a diverse workforce, and that's something that kind of keeps them going, keeps them motivated. Or they believe in having like a remote company. And again, that's something that makes them kind of keep going and getting to work every day, because even if, you know, your product isn't good or whatever, like you still have that to kind of carry you. It's interesting. You know, one thing that I think I've seen in conversation come up quite a bit is also, you know, that a key to succeeding, you know, for founders is like not asking yourself too many questions and kind of powering through.
Yeah, totally.
Do you feel like that's something also that's true? Like we talk about all these things about introspecting yourself and and kind of handling that and having that support, but how much do you feel like, you know, the trick is just kind of like not letting those things kind of get to you at all?
I think there's a difference between like asking really good and deep questions to unearth the truth, and coming to the point where you say, I made a decision, then not questioning the decision anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's really important, like once you make a decision, like you're not like going back on your decision, and like that is what kills people, like typically.
Right. That over-analyzing and
exactly.
overthinking about it. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense, and I hope kind of people in general think about that more, you know, employees about their founders, investors about their founders about themselves, how difficult it can be internally, and how much they kind of have to think about like taking care of themselves, you know, while they're taking care of their company and taking care of others. So yeah, thank you so much. It was really great to talk about it.
Really fantastic having you here.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's a hornet's nest. There are a lot of issues, but the one that I think is one of the more easily fixable ones, and one of the ones that I've kind of noticed, is that there are a lot of companies that are taking their cues from some of the bigger players. So you look at how Google hires, or you look at how Facebook hires, right? And it almost becomes this cargo cult, where there are a ton of smaller companies that don't need to have process at that scale, but just blindly copy what these companies are doing. And they'll blindly copy the criteria that these companies use to even figure out who they're going to let in the door, as well as their interview process and a lot of other things that they don't necessarily need. So what ends up happening is you have all these people that are really, really great engineers, but didn't end up going to MIT or Stanford or have worked at, you know, Google, Facebook, or a particularly prominent Y Combinator company. But they're never even going to be able to get in the door. So you have this long tail of people that are just as good.